Imagine living in a country where loneliness is a public health crisis, work consumes your life, and even the act of dying can leave a financial burden on your family. Shocking, isn't it? Yet, this is the harsh reality for many in Japan. Why is this happening? And why are more and more people reluctant to settle in this fascinating yet challenging country? Let's dive deep into the hidden truths about life in Japan that no one talks about. Hi everyone, welcome back to Wander Chronicles 79, where we uncover the world's most intriguing stories and hidden realities. Today we're exploring a topic that's as surprising as it is thought-provoking: why nobody wants to live in Japan. Japan is a land of incredible beauty, cutting-edge technology, and rich cultural heritage. Yet beneath its polished exterior lies a society grappling with profound challenges. From crushing work culture to an aging population and unexpected social issues, the reasons are far from simple. Stick around because we're uncovering 10 shocking reasons that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about Japan. And don't miss our special segment at the end where we'll discuss the big question: is Japan truly a paradise or just a polished illusion? Japan, with its towering skyscrapers, cutting-edge technology, and rich cultural heritage, often seems like the epitome of a modern, connected society. But behind the glittering lights, an epidemic of loneliness is quietly spreading, claiming millions of lives, both figuratively and literally. Storytelling moment. Meet Hiroshi, a 35-year-old man who hasn't left his apartment in over a decade. His days consist of watching TV shows, playing video games, and ordering food delivery. Nothing else. He used to work in an office, but the demands of corporate life wore him down. The long hours, the relentless pressure to perform, and the feeling of being invisible among thousands of other workers eventually led him to withdraw from society entirely. Hiroshi is part of the hikikomori phenomenon, a term that refers to individuals who withdraw from social life and isolate themselves in their homes. There are over 1 million people like Hiroshi in Japan, and they represent the tip of an iceberg. Japan's loneliness epidemic is not just limited to hikikomori, it permeates all age groups. Many elderly people live their final years without visitors, while young people struggle to form meaningful relationships in a culture where social expectations are high and the pressure to conform is immense. How could such a technologically advanced society fail to combat loneliness? The answer lies in Japan's cultural norms, where emotional expression is often suppressed and individualism is frowned upon. Stay with us as we uncover more about this crisis. In Japan, work is not just a means to an end, it's a way of life. The concept of salaryman is deeply embedded in the culture, where individuals dedicate their entire lives to their employers. Yet this work-driven culture is costing lives. Storytelling moment. Take the tragic story of Miwa Sato, a young journalist who worked tirelessly for her news station. Miwa, like many others, worked grueling hours, often 100 or more overtime hours per month. She collapsed at her desk one fateful night, a victim of karoshi, death by overwork. Her death, while tragic, was not an isolated incident. In fact, the Japanese government has officially recognized karoshi as a legal cause of death, a chilling reminder of the pressure and exhaustion felt by millions of workers in the country. But Miwa's story is just one of many. Imagine being expected to stay late every night, missing out on family time, and sacrificing personal well-being for the company. This is a reality for many in Japan. It's not uncommon for workers to go for days without taking proper breaks, eating irregularly, and suffering from extreme fatigue. The competitive and hierarchical corporate environment demands perfection at the cost of health and happiness. Japan's work culture is built on an unspoken rule: sacrifice your personal life for the company, and you will be rewarded with job security and status. Yet this comes at a devastating price. Japan is facing an impending crisis that no other nation has experienced at such a scale: the aging of its population. With one of the world's highest life expectancies and a rapidly declining birth rate, Japan's demographic landscape is shifting drastically. Storytelling moment. In rural Japan, entire villages are being abandoned as elderly residents pass away, and younger generations leave in search of work in the cities. These small villages, once bustling with families and children, are now eerily silent. Schools have closed down, and houses sit empty, slowly decaying. The few remaining elderly residents are left to care for themselves, without the support of a younger workforce. To cope with the isolation, some of these villages have begun using lifelike dolls to replace the lost human presence. These dolls, often dressed in traditional Japanese clothing, sit in empty homes as a symbolic gesture of maintaining community spirit. What happens when more than a quarter of a nation's population is over the age of 65? The implications extend far beyond just healthcare. It's a complete reshaping of the economy, labor market, and social infrastructure. Japan's cities, particularly Tokyo, are infamous for their sky-high living costs. Housing prices in these urban areas are exorbitant, and daily expenses can quickly add up, making life in Japan a financial strain for many residents. Storytelling moment. Meet Akiko, a single mother living in the heart of Tokyo. Akiko works 2 jobs to make ends meet. Her tiny one-room apartment is a far cry from the spacious homes many envision when they think of Japan. Every month, she struggles to pay her rent, her utility bills, and her child's education expenses. Despite her best efforts, she can barely afford to buy groceries and often skips meals to make sure her child has enough to eat. Akiko's story highlights a widespread issue in Japan. While the country is technologically advanced, its cost of living is among the highest in the world. Tokyo has some of the highest rent rates in the world, with a small, modest apartment costing thousands of dollars a month. Combine that with the cost of healthcare, transportation, and food, and it becomes clear that Japan's high standard of living is out of reach for many people. Despite Japan's global reputation for technological advancement and innovation, mental health issues are still considered taboo in many circles. The pressure to conform and maintain appearances often leads people to bottle up their emotions and avoid seeking help. Storytelling moment. Takashi, a university student in Tokyo, had been battling depression for years. But every time he thought about seeking help, the overwhelming fear of being judged stopped him. In Japan, people who show signs of weakness or vulnerability are often viewed with disdain, especially in the professional world. Takashi's story ended tragically when he took his own life, unable to cope with the weight of his mental health struggles in a society that values stoicism and silence. The stigma surrounding mental health in Japan is deeply ingrained in the culture. Even though suicide rates have been steadily increasing, many people still refuse to acknowledge mental health problems as real issues, and mental health professionals are often overwhelmed with cases. Seeking therapy is seen as a sign of failure rather than a step toward healing. Japan's position in global gender equality rankings has long been at the bottom, with women facing significant barriers in the workplace and society at large. Storytelling moment. Yuki, a brilliant lawyer in Tokyo, faced daily challenges in her career. Despite her qualifications and dedication, she was passed over for promotions in favor of male colleagues. Her salary was consistently lower than that of her male counterparts, and she was expected to prioritize her family over her career. Yuki's story is not unique. Many women in Japan struggle with the same barriers: limited career opportunities, wage gaps, and societal pressure to fulfill traditional roles as wives and mothers. Women in Japan are often forced to choose between their careers and their families. the work culture combined with outdated gender norms makes it incredibly difficult for women to thrive in the professional world. As a result, many highly educated women leave their careers behind to become full-time mothers, reinforcing the gender disparities that persist across generations. Japan is known for its reluctance to open its doors to immigrants, despite facing an aging population and labor shortages. Storytelling moment. David, an English teacher from Canada, moved to Japan to teach after university. Despite living in Japan for over a decade, David still felt like an outsider. His lack of fluency in Japanese and his foreign appearance made it difficult to connect with locals. He faced significant cultural and linguistic barriers, which made integrating into Japanese society almost impossible. David's experience is shared by many foreigners living in Japan. The country's strict immigration policies and cultural insularity make it challenging for outsiders to feel truly at home. Japan is located on the Pacific Ring of Fire, which makes it prone to frequent natural disasters like earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons. These disasters are an ever-present part of life, and despite Japan's advanced technology and preparedness, the human toll is still immense. Storytelling moment. In March 2011, Japan was struck by the Tohoku earthquake, a magnitude 9.0 quake that triggered a massive tsunami, devastating the northeastern coastline. Entire towns were swept away by the ferocious waves, and the aftermath left over 18,000 dead or missing. The impact on Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant caused widespread radiation fears, further compounding the national trauma. While Japan's infrastructure, including early warning systems, is among the best in the world, the scale of the disaster exposed vulnerabilities in disaster response and recovery efforts. For survivors like Yuki, the 2011 earthquake and tsunami represent not just a moment in time, but an ongoing struggle. Yuki lost her home in the floodwaters that came from the tsunami, and her family was displaced for years. "I thought we would rebuild and move on quickly," she says, but the emotional scars are deep. The fear of another earthquake, the uncertainty, and the trauma linger. It's something I'll never fully escape. Yuki's experience is shared by thousands of others who are still struggling to rebuild their homes and their lives, and many of them live in constant anxiety of the next big disaster. Japan's disaster preparedness has saved many lives, with sophisticated early warning systems and evacuation drills that are drilled into the nation's consciousness from a young age. Yet, for many people, it's impossible to erase the fear of the next natural calamity. Earthquakes, no matter how minor, can trigger panic. Even with all the safety precautions, the knowledge that another catastrophic event could be just around the corner weighs heavily on the mind. But it's not just the damage from the disasters themselves. What happens when the ground shakes, the water rises, and the storm hits? The emotional toll, the displacement, and the haunting fear of the next disaster often have far-reaching effects that don't disappear overnight. Join us as we explore how Japan copes with this constant anxiety. Kotokushi, or lonely death, is a growing phenomenon in Japan. With an aging population and increasingly isolated communities, many elderly people die alone and are not discovered until days or even weeks later. This silent epidemic of loneliness is exacerbated by the rigid societal structure, which often makes it difficult for people to form close relationships or maintain social connections. Storytelling moment. Take the story of Mr. Tanaka, a 72-year-old man who lived alone in a small apartment in Osaka. For years, he had been a regular visitor to the local neighborhood store, where he would chat briefly with the owner. But over time, Mr. Tanaka's visits became less frequent. One morning, his neighbors noticed that the blinds in his apartment were drawn and his door remained locked. After several days of no contact, they became concerned. When the landlord opened the door, they discovered that Mr. Tanaka had passed away quietly in his home, alone, with no one to notice for nearly a week. The concept of kodokushi has become so common in Japan that specialized companies have emerged to deal with the aftermath. These lonely death cleaning services are hired to clean apartments where individuals have passed away alone. Workers often encounter bodies in varying states of decomposition, and the apartments are filled with items that remain untouched by loved ones. For many elderly people, the absence of family and the shrinking social circle means that their final moments go unnoticed. Social isolation is an unfortunate byproduct of Japan's aging society. The younger generation, struggling with work pressures and family responsibilities, is often unable to care for aging relatives. Meanwhile, rural areas face depopulation, leaving elderly residents stranded without a support system. There is a stigma around seeking help in Japan, where it's still considered shameful to admit that one is struggling with loneliness. In a country where self-reliance is highly valued, those who are unable to live independently or maintain a social network often suffer in silence. For the elderly, this loneliness is compounded by the loss of friends and family members who have passed away over the years. As health deteriorates and mobility becomes a challenge, many elderly citizens are left to face the realities of growing old alone. But behind this tragic phenomenon lies a deeper question. How did Japan, one of the most technologically advanced societies in the world, allow an entire segment of its population to die in isolation? The solution is not just about caregiving, it's about changing the very fabric of social relationships. In response to this crisis, local governments have begun offering more programs for elderly care. But these efforts are still not enough to fully combat the isolation many elderly citizens face. Initiatives like friendly visiting programs, where volunteers regularly check on elderly citizens living alone, are helping to reduce the number of lonely deaths, but much more needs to be done. As Japan's population continues to age, the issue of kodokushi is becoming an urgent public health concern, with calls for a shift in cultural attitudes toward aging and loneliness. The elderly in Japan, who once played a vital role in family life, now find themselves in a system that is not equipped to care for them. For many, the only solution is to face death alone. Education in Japan is highly regarded, with a rigorous system that has produced some of the world's most disciplined and skilled individuals. However, this comes at a significant cost to students and their families, who face immense pressure to succeed in a hyper-competitive environment. Storytelling moment. Aiko, a 16-year-old high school student, spends her days attending school and her evenings at a cram school, or juku, preparing for university entrance exams. Her weekends are no respite, filled with mock tests and endless study sessions. The pressure is overwhelming, as her future seemingly depends on achieving high scores in these life-defining exams. For Aiko, failure is not an option, as societal and familial expectations weigh heavily on her young shoulders. Japan's education system has often been described as a pressure cooker, where children are pushed to their limits from an early age. The intense focus on rote memorization and standardized testing leaves little room for creativity or personal growth. The result? Many students experience burnout, anxiety, and depression, even before entering adulthood. Parents, too, feel the strain, spending significant portions of their income on tuition, tutoring, and exam preparation materials. The cycle of pressure affects entire families, creating a culture where academic achievement is prioritized above all else. What happens when a nation's youth are burdened with such intense expectations? The long-term mental health effects are profound, raising questions about whether this system truly prepares students for life or simply drains them of it. Japan, despite its outward image of perfection, is grappling with deep societal issues that affect millions of its citizens. The country's challenges, Loneliness, work culture, aging population, cost of living, mental health stigma, gender inequality, and more paint a much more complicated picture than what tourists and outsiders often see. But amidst these challenges, there's hope. A new generation of Japanese citizens is beginning to question the status quo, advocating for change in work culture, gender equality, and mental health awareness. As Japan continues to evolve, the hope is that these issues will be addressed, allowing future generations to live in a society that balances both tradition and progress. What do you think? Would you still want to live in Japan? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode, where we uncover the dark secrets of another global destination. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next adventure.